Hi, my name is Kat Lanthang, and I am the co-founder and executive director of BloodWatch.org. Our organization represents tainted blood survivors from across the country, safe blood advocates, citizens who support a public Canadian voluntary blood system, as well as patients who are dependent on plasma-based medications and the blood that Canadian Blood Services collects. We're here in New Brunswick because the pharmaceutical company, or rather the blood broker that we had banned from Ontario, is now trying to set up shop here in New Brunswick. We have incredible concerns about why the health minister or the government of New Brunswick would ever support that model being implemented. Here, it contravenes in its entirety the Creever inquiry, which was the 4-year, $17 million federal inquiry into the failings of our public blood system. The huge piece that is incredibly important, I cannot stress this enough, to the people of New Brunswick. The plasma that is collected by a private blood broker will be exported out of Canada for sale. This is absolutely outrageous, and it's dangerous because it takes away plasma that could go to save the life of a Canadian. And the only way that we can ensure that we save the life of a fellow Canadian citizen is to donate to Canadian Blood Services. This morning, the head of Canadian Blood Services came out publicly to support our voluntary blood system. He has also shared his concerns about where that plasma would go. The only buyer for plasma-based medications not made by Canadian Blood Services is Canadian Blood Services. And Canadian Blood Services will not buy the plasma collected by that private blood broker. And so they have to be banned. You cannot let them set up in this province.
It is absolutely insane that after the Creever inquiry and the pain and suffering that so many Canadians went through because of insecurity in our blood services and our blood supply, that we would contemplate reopening this market in New Brunswick. If this is Premier Gallant's idea of economic development, literally selling the blood of New Brunswickers overseas, then God help this province. When I was 17, was in an airplane accident and only survived because of a series of blood transfusions. This was back in the 1980s, and I went through years of insecurity after that because of the fear that I could have contracted hepatitis, HIV, and one of the different diseases that were then circulating in the blood system because of the lack of control and oversight by government. No one should have to go through that experience again. No one should have to go through the experience of living with life-threatening and sometimes fatal diseases. This does not make any sense. I encourage our government to go back and look at history, to look at the results of the Creever inquiry, to talk to the Canadian men and women still living with diseases they contracted during a period when the blood system was insecure, and to reflect within themselves about ways in which we can truly develop the economy of this province without undermining a public healthcare system and without literally selling New Brunswickers' blood overseas. This is not the way that we should be doing things. There's going to be a worldwide ban on the sale of human tissue products by the World Health Organization in 2020. We all know that companies who have a built-in self-destruct time are not necessarily going to be the companies that are going to be acting in the best public interest. The slogan of the Canada Blood Services is that it's in you to give. And we should be focusing on that, building up our voluntary blood supply so that Canadians can help each other, so that we can make sure we have a healthier and happier country. This project should be opposed, and I hope that all parties and all nonprofit groups and New Brunswickers as a whole will rise up against their government in this and say, please, in the name of God, don't make the same mistake twice. Thank you.
Évidemment, on est certainement contre la revenue de Canadian Plasma Resort à Moncton, puis au Nouveau-Brunswick. C'est clair qu'on ne comprend pas justement comment notre ministre de la Santé, Victor Boudreau, peut même parler d'accepter ou même de regarder à cette venue-là. Ce qui nous inquiète certainement le plus, c'est les gens qui sont ciblés par une compagnie comme ceci. Donc, les gens qui sont ciblés pour donner du sang ou donner du plasma, c'est certainement les gens les plus vulnérables. Donc, les travailleurs à petit salaire qui ont pas assez d'argent pour faire le mois. Donc, pour eux, peut-être, ça serait quelque chose qu'ils regarderaient. Et on sait qu'à Moncton, il y en a beaucoup qui sont dans cette situation-là. Les jeunes, lorsqu'on regarde sur le site web de la compagnie, des jeunes de 17 ans et plus peuvent donner, et peuvent donner à tous les semaines. Donc, à Moncton, dans un rayon de 100 km, il y a trois universités. Il y a Mount Allison, il y a Moncton, il y a aussi Crandall. Donc, il y a une base. Il y a 5 à 6 écoles secondaires aussi. Et l'autre qui sont ciblés, évidemment, c'est les sans-abri, qui eux aussi ont besoin d'aide. Mais c'est certainement pas une façon de les aider. Donc, on comprend que le gouvernement veut développer supposément l'économie, mais c'est certainement pas une façon de le faire. Et parce que cette compagnie-là, vraiment, c'est un genre de sangsue qui est sur le corps des plus vulnérables. Et ailleurs, on le voit, c'est ces gens-là qui sont qu'on cible. So, like for us at the Health Coalition, we're certainly against any of this idea of the Victor Boudreau, the health minister, to accept like the Canadian plasma resource to come to Moncton. We're certainly against any privatization of this kind, and that's what really it is. We're also very concerned about who they target, and essentially they're targeting people that are vulnerable. So one, certainly people living and working, but at small income, and there's a lot of them in the Moncton area. They're targeting young people because if you look at their website, anybody that's 17 years old and more can give, and they can give each week, not just once a month. And in Moncton, there's 3 universities around 100 kilometers. There's about 6 high schools. There's 2 community colleges. So there's a lot of young people that are going to be targeted. And also, of course, people that are homeless. And again, Moncton has quite a population. So where it's really, the way we see it, this company is kind of a bloodsucker on the more vulnerable in our society. So we're certainly against their coming, and we hope that the general public will make their position known to our elected MLAs. Thank you.
Just like to also acknowledge the presence of Mr. Carr from the Progressive Conservative Caucus here in the room today, and I hope that he'll take this message back to his caucus, and hopefully we can see some statements in the legislature to make it clear that this is, again, not something that New Brunswickers want. Questions? Anyone has any questions?
Have you, what have you heard from the New Brunswick government on this? What have they said to you about it? As you've arrived in New Brunswick, have you got any meetings with them set up or anything like that?
I have not heard, and I've been writing Minister Boudreau for weeks now. I have had no response from his office. I did get a response from Premier Gallant's office yesterday, which stated that they didn't have time to meet with me. The only response I have been able to get is from some of the other members of the legislature.
What's your reaction to the CEO of Canadian Blood Services coming out a bit stronger and saying we're not going to buy this product from them?
I think it's a very good sign. I think that Dr. Scher from Canadian Blood Services has a direct responsibility to Canadian patients, and he's demonstrating that now. This is a competitor for him to care for Canadian patients. And so it is a very, very serious issue for Canadian Blood Services. I attended the AGM just last week where we shared these concerns with Dr. Scher and the board. There were multiple organizations there at that annual general meeting. I also met with the Vice President of Canadian Blood Services a couple weeks prior to that, and they are very, very concerned about this competitor in the market. They're also share our concerns because they do not know where that plasma is going. Neither does Minister Boudreau. Neither does the Federal Health Minister, Jane Philpott. Nobody in this country that is responsible for the health and safety of Canadians when it comes to our blood system has any idea where that blood plasma is going. That is madness. What is happening right now is exactly what Justice Krieger said never to do, ever. There is no reason to do this that benefits one Canadian citizen or one Canadian patient. And from our organization's point of view, it is absolutely outrageous. We have been fighting this company off for almost 5 years. They have a rapacious lobby. They have been selling this as a business model, and I can only respond to the comments that Minister Boudreau has made publicly because I haven't spoken to him. And selling off the blood of New Brunswickers that will undermine our voluntary blood system for a handful of jobs after 8,000 people will die in this country because of tainted blood is absolutely objectionable. It is not okay. And to be fair to the health minister, he hasn't had an opportunity to actually listen to the other side because he hasn't consulted with anybody. So they don't know where that blood plasma is going. Canadian Blood Services will never buy it from that company. I can assure you, they will never buy it. It doesn't matter what tendering process that company goes through or what product they make. Because in this country, every drop of blood or plasma that is collected should be by Canadian Blood Services, full stop. So why are we doing this? It is completely mystifies me why some of the provincial health ministers have taken on and supported this company.
We have a shortage in voluntary donations for plasma. I understand it doesn't, we don't give enough to meet our needs in terms of medications. What should we do to enhance that if you want voluntary plasma donations?
So we actually don't have a shortage of donors. Canadian Blood Services has just not been collecting the plasma. So that's two very different things. Currently, we don't have plasma clinics set up in any urban center in the country, and we don't have any plasma clinics set up specifically on university campuses, which is a great place to secure voluntary donors, especially when you want the new generation understanding how important it is to donate in order to save a citizen's life. They are, and you can check with Canadian Blood Services, they are about to roll out a plan to double or triple plasma collection in this country. And we don't want anything that would impede them in that goal. And so that's something that they have been working on for a few years now, but they are rolling out. And the health ministers need to understand that that's what we need to be supporting. The other thing that the people of New Brunswick and the health ministers should understand is that you're not saving any money, because you always have to fund Canadian Blood Services. You always have to provide that medication. And so they are always going to have to give Canadian Blood Services the same amount of money, whether Canadian Blood Services is making the drug or whether they're having to buy that drug from a pharmaceutical company. And so that is why this is all confusing, because there is no benefit on our end as Canadians, but we take all the risk.
Monsieur Basque, pourquoi ce serait mauvais de donner l'occasion aux plus démunis de donner du sang et d'avoir de cette façon-là une façon d'arrondir leur fin de mois, qui va peut-être pas dire comme ça, mais c'est quoi le problème avec ça? Ça peut aider les plus démunis de façon de...
Mais justement, c'est, tu l'as bien dit, arrondir les fins de mois. Il y a un vraiment problème lorsque on est dans une société que pour arrondir ton fin de mois, tu es obligé de vendre ton sang, ton plasma. Ça fait, je pense que c'est là le problème de base, c'est qu'on ne devrait pas ouvrir cette porte-là. Parce que si on l'ouvre à ce moment-là, on pourrait dire, ben, pourquoi que les plus démunis ne vendraient pas leur rang pour arrondir leur fin de mois ou un de leurs poumons. Ça fait, je pense, c'est ouvrir tout ce boîte de Pandore, là, de un. Et deux, c'est que là aussi, si tu regardes sur leur site web, pour les gens qui vont donner, qui vont y aller à ces cliniques-là, ils disent qu'ils devraient bien manger, avoir une bonne diète, etc. Mais les plus démunis, là, ils n'ont pas ce genre de diète-là. Ils vont en banque alimentaire, ils vont au Soupe populaire. Ça fait, c'est des gens qui sont vulnérables économiquement, mais ils sont vulnérables aussi au niveau de la santé, mais on veut qu'ils donnent une partie de leur, le plasma. Ça fait, je pense que c'est tout cet aspect-là qui est vraiment néfaste puis qui n'est pas acceptable. Et là aussi, on a un plan de réduction de la pauvreté pour justement aider les gens qui vivent en situation de pauvreté. C'est certainement pas cette manière ici qu'on va les aider. C'est tout simplement les ramener à ce moment-là à des... un peu, c'est un humain, mais c'est un humain qui est seulement là comme... comment dire en anglais, expendable. Là. Ça fait, c'est certainement pas quelque chose qu'on accepte, puis c'est certainement quelque chose qu'on va se battre contre.
Est-ce que je peux ajouter un point à ça? C'est aussi le fait qu'en 4 ans, l'Organisation mondiale de santé va éliminer le marché. Alors, est-ce que c'est vraiment quelque chose de responsable aujourd'hui en Nouveau-Brunswick de dire aux plus vulnérables que, OK, tu peux commencer d'augmenter ton salaire chaque mois, chaque semaine par 25 $, mais après 4 ans, on va enlever parce qu'on va avoir une fin à ce marché dans tout le monde dans 4 ans. Alors, c'est quand l'entreprise en question dit « Ah, ça ne va pas avoir un impact sur le système parce qu'on va utiliser les mêmes gens qui sont déjà en train de faire les dons. » C'est clair que ce n'est pas vrai. On a vu ça dans les États-Unis, dans l'Allemagne, dans les 2 autres pays où il y a déjà un marché dans les produits de sang, de plasma. Que, quand Jean-Claude a dit, pour la plupart, c'est les plus vulnérables qui ont besoin d'accéder à ce marché. Et si on encourage les gens de prendre l'argent dans cette manière, ça va juste rendre encore plus grand les problèmes de santé, parce que aussi, c'est vrai, j'espère que tout le monde ici dans la salle qui peut le faire, qui sont déjà les personnes qui donnent leur sang quand c'est possible. Tu sais, après qu'ils enlèvent le sang pour quelques heures, que tu es un peu fatigué, c'est difficile de concentrer, etc. Alors, c'est exactement la chose qu'on n'a pas besoin d'encourager dans les gens qui sont déjà vulnérables, déjà les problèmes d'accéder, les emplois, etc. Alors, on a besoin d'encourager les vrais programmes pour éliminer la pauvreté dans la province. Et on ne va pas faire ça en transformer les pauvres dans la province dans les animaux, qu'on enlève les produits de leur corps. C'est absolument inacceptable.
Yeah, you have to remember, like, the target group is not going to be doctors, lawyers, CEOs, and these kind of people. It's going to be the vulnerable. And that's what's so awful about this.
Et s'il dit que c'est les étudiants qu'il veut encourager, comme Mme Lantagne a dit, on a besoin d'encourager les jeunes de commencer de développer l'habitude de faire les dons dans une manière volontaire pour toute leur vie. Et si on commence les gens, c'est juste quand on encourage les jeunes de commencer de voter. S'ils votent dans une première élection, il y a une grande chance qu'ils vont continuer de voter dans les prochaines élections. Si on encourage les gens de prendre l'argent pour faire les dons, c'est une grande probabilité qu'ils vont continuer de faire ça jusqu'à 4 ans d'aujourd'hui, et à ce jour, le marché va disparaître. Alors, c'est vraiment un grand défi pour le système volontaire dans le pays. Et on a vu déjà en Ontario, dans les autres provinces, c'est déjà illégal. Et Québec, pourquoi est-ce qu'on va encourager le développement d'un marché à la fin de vie de ce marché? Parce que, encore, ça va être éliminé en 4 ans. Et aussi quelque chose qui ont déjà vu les problèmes avec tous les incidents des années 80, 90, avec tout le rapport de M. Kruger, etc. Any other questions?
Is part of the concern that vulnerable people are enticed to give that because they need the money that they might take risks? That part of the concern? Because you're talking about the safety of the system. So I assume that's what you just wanted someone to clarify.
So it is a fact that at the point of collection, and this is in the European Blood Alliance report, which is all of the public blood services of the EU, and it was well documented during the Creever inquiry, that at the point of collection, voluntary donations are safer. Because when you provide an financial incentive, the donor is more encouraged to lie about their status of those questions because they need the money. And this is not a scientific argument, because we have had the ability since Creever made his recommendations to treat the plasma in a way to ensure that the viruses that we know about are taken out of the plasma. But you do never want to source plasma from any kind of high-risk population or provide a risk, because you are always looking for the next virus that you don't know about. But the other issue is, in this country, we protect the donor, and we take that very seriously here. And we protect the health of the donor. And under Canadian Blood Services and our public model, that donor is protected when they go in to donate. And we will not have the kind of oversight into a private clinic. It doesn't matter what anybody says. All Health Canada does is regulate the clinic. It's essentially a private corporation. And so we have very little control. And that's not how we should be treating our donors in this country, because we need them and we need to respect them. And we also need to be able to give them the proper information of where to go, what clinic to go to, and what kind of blood we need at the time. And that can only and should only be coming from Canadian Blood Services.
Do you mean that Canadian Blood Services goes over and beyond what just that basic health regulations are?
Well, Canadian Blood Services has the oversight, and that's what is most important to us. And so they have a direct responsibility, because they are directly responsible for the health of everybody involved. The owner of this company has made it very clear that they are not a healthcare facility, that they are here to do a business, and that is just not okay when it comes to the procurement of human tissue.
What are you asking the government to do exactly? Is it as simple as to pass a law and then solution should be all right, or is it more complicated than that?
We passed the law in Ontario called the Voluntary Blood Donations Act, which is a very straightforward law. It doesn't cost the province any money to do. What it does is it bans the private sale of blood and plasma, and so it protects it as a public resource, which is what Justice Creever intended. It essentially is following through with one of the last recommendations out of the Creever inquiry. Quebec had already done it without any, push. They had just naturally implemented a similar law. So that's what we are asking the government of New Brunswick to do. It's a legacy that they can leave. It's, like I said, not a very complicated law. But right now, what they need to do is to tell that company that they are not welcome. So I don't know what kind of deal that they have made with this company, but they need to revoke it immediately. In Ontario, these clinics were set up, all three. They'd already spent $7 million. The province was not informed, and the entire Legislative Assembly in Ontario, every single MPP, stood up and they voted for the Voluntary Blood Donations Act, and they stood up for our Canadian blood system. It's my expectation that that is what the government of New Brunswick will do, because we share blood in this country. So what one province does impacts every other citizen in this country, and we have a responsibility to one another when it comes to saving the life of people through blood and plasma.
We know that Canadian Blood Services already gets a lot of their supply from U.S. companies that do pay their donors.
Yeah.
Do you see a point where they will be able to get enough donors in Canada that they don't have to do that anymore?
So, and I just want to clarify that they're buying a finished medication, so we don't import raw plasma into Canada. We're not allowed to. Canadian Blood Services is rolling out their plan to collect double to triple more plasma. The reality is that they have to be successful, and Canadians have to help them, because we must work towards self-sufficiency. It is just a reality of the human experience that there are people who will need blood and plasma, whether it's fresh or whether it's a plasma-based medication. And until we make, huge progress and those products are synthetic, we need to make it successful. We can't allow it to fail. And that's why we all need to band together and support Canadian Blood Services in their endeavor.
Just in response to both of those questions, the first one on the law, I don't understand why a mid-ranking health department official didn't simply tell this company they weren't welcome in New Brunswick. And the fact they didn't is concerning. And something we have not been able to find out yet is this company going to be receiving government subsidies? Are we going to be paying for this not just in the blood of our most vulnerable population, but also with our tax dollars? Because this government has had a history of creating jobs through corporate welfare schemes. Is this company going to be part of that? We haven't been able to get the answers the same way that Ms. Lantang has not been able to get a meeting with the minister or any other government officials. So this could be stopped even without a law today by the government simply saying to this company, you are not welcome here. And if they continue to push, then absolutely pass the law. But this could be stopped here and now today if the minister chose to do so. So it's up to them, it's their choice. The fact that they continue to hide and unfortunately avoid meetings and refuse to answer questions about funding sources is something that the government is going to have to explain and be held accountable for. Any other questions?
Just to comment on that, actually, we have, QB has the 3 locals in New Brunswick with Canadian Blood Services, and many of our members have said that they fear that Opportunity New Brunswick is going to finance the for-profit plasma collection. So we have a public system, a non-profit system, and we have the public system coming in financing the private system on the backside, which is really, I hope this is just a rumor, but like you said, the fact that you couldn't get in a meeting is really troubling.
If they won't answer the questions, then they can't blame people for coming to the worst conclusions, given there is no political upside to this for this government. And if Mr. Gallant really thinks that he's going to be able to stand up in front of New Brunswickers and say, guess what, we're selling our blood around the world, reducing the supply domestically, compromising the security of the system. If he really thinks that's a solid platform on which to run for re-election, then I'm glad I'm not one of his advisors, well, for a number of reasons. But in this particular case, it's a fairly inexplicable plan, which again leaves you to wonder, what is going on here? Why would they not simply say no? And until they answer that question, we're going to keep asking.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
When I see that the government is moving in this direction, it defies logic. Nurses cannot support this. We believe that it must be a voluntary public system, and paying for that plasma violates that. The Creaver report took 4 years in this country, $17 million, and to now have it ignored because somebody wants to broker blood to export it out of this country makes no sense.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.